News First, Newsline with Faraz Shauketaly.
And a very good morning to you. This is Newsline, live as always from the Newsfirst studios in Dawson Street in Colombo. And another nice day out there. Not too wet, not too dry, brilliant. And that's all part of living in this wonderful tropical island of ours. And we of course broadcast on TV1. And this morning, to discuss a matter that may or may not take on a different dimension, the intimidation of journalists, is Mr. Malinda Seniviratne. Very good morning to you.
Good morning, Faraz.
Nice to see you here again.
Glad to be here.
Now then, in between all these various issues, highway gate, bond gate, coal gate, as in not in the toothpaste,
yes.
but coal, supply of coal gate, a watered down national audit bill with the ramifications frightening to even think about. In between all that, you have claims that journalists are being intimidated. We're referring to, of course, the article that came out from New York, and the fact that 2 local journalists worked on that copy, and that they were subject to some form of intimidation within quotes. What's going on? Is that par for the course? What is it?
Well, first of all, let's go through quickly the sequence of events.
Yes.
In 2015, the Daily News, the state-owned newspaper, carried this story.
Yeah.
2018, we have the New York Times carrying virtually the same story.
Yeah.
And at the bottom of the article, they mentioned 2 contributors.
Yeah.
One of whom, when I asked him, he said, well, I'm a stringer. I was putting the particular correspondent in touch with various people. That was all my contribution.
Right.
The other person is currently the editor of one of the state-owned newspapers and is also a correspondent for the New York Times. When the story, this is a rehashing of an old story. There's nothing much to talk about there. But then we saw, very nasty comments on social media about these 2 journalists.
Yeah.
And the problem with social media is, there are no regulations, self-regulatory, and people can say anything, and a lot of nasty things have been said about a lot of people, including me. You don't do anything about it, you don't take it too seriously. But the issue was when 2 politicians of the joint opposition, Dala Salhaperuma and Kanchana Wijayasekara, held up the photograph of one of the journalists and said, well, this is an old story. They kind of went through that whole thing and said, why is the media minister not taking issue with this?
Yeah.
But I don't think, Faraz, that constitutes intimidation. The New York Times, the Committee for Protection of Journalists, they have said, if you have any issue with anything written or anything published or any content in the media, you have to take it up with the editor.
Yeah.
Now, I don't really buy that. I put my name to an article, you put your name to your article. We take responsibility for what we write and what the content that we produce.
Yeah.
And thereby we are saying, okay, if you have any issues, talk to me.
Indeed.
That's fine. Name me, shame me. We have the Prime Minister in Parliament and in Sirikota, 2016, attacking Derana, attacking Kesara Abhayawardena, editor of the Daily Mirror. But none of these organizations said anything about that kind of intimidation. Why?
Why?
So it's selective. So that's politics, right? When it's selective, it is politics. But there was no harsh intimidation or anything like that. If you look at that the videotape of those 2 politicians, that's pretty mild.
Right.
But having said that, as I think the CPA pointed out, there's a history of politicians on that side having intimidated journalists in the previous regime. They mentioned that 11 journalists were killed and so on. And so there's a Goni Billa being created about all that. maybe some of that fear is justified, but I don't think when you take just that part that you can make a big noise. Just on the same day that Mangala Samaravira came out and issued a statement about this intimidation, I think was it Newsfirst played a tape of one of his close associates, officials, an audio tape of him attacking a journalist, threatening. How that person continues to work for him, how he has not seen that, then that makes me wonder what is all this about. Is it a service?
Well, I'm also wondering the same thing, Malinda, because if you remember, around the 17th of March 2015, when the Prime Minister came to give a statement in Parliament that was about the bond. Around the same time, I'm not entirely sure if it was on the same day, the Prime Minister named and shamed various businessmen. He called one of them a failed businessman, but had all his businesses had failed, according to the information of the Prime Minister, and he said that that person managed to obtain some money to buy a newspaper and to shape public opinion, almost to say that if you are a failed businessman, you shouldn't be shaping public opinion. Anyway, that's what he said.
But how can a failed businessman purchase anything, even a pettikade?
Well, that's what I mean. So he couldn't have been that failed, because he did persuade some banks to give him the money to buy whatever that paper was.
But then you can persuade banks to give money. We know that from
yes, that's right. That's another one. I'm going to come to that in a minute today. But the whole point is this, that we now find that the Prime Minister, as the leader of that party, has engaged in giving a contract to that same
failed businessman.
That to another businessman who owns another TV station. Right? But that person was named in Parliament. And so we're sitting there and wondering what on earth's happened to all that. So you have anomalies. It's like they came and said that a particular Chinese company was 90% corruption, 10% work. Then we find that the same man who said that, the Prime Minister, of course he said it when he was in opposition, has awarded a contract to that same company in the same project at probably more money. We don't know.
That is, either he was ignorant then, or he's ignorant now, or he's just being a politician. This is deception, right? I mean, it doesn't. They were talking. If you remember, in the run-up to the presidential election, they were talking that we are going to scrap Port City, we are going to do this, that, and the other. None of which happened. So it's just so they were hoodwinking the public.
But do you think when we started this, and I told you about intimidation journalists, and you said, "Well, I don't buy that because I don't buy that." You don't buy it because, is it because we journalists have become so blasé about all this stuff that's going on? Like for example, when this network was under some sort of intimidation and threat, very recently after the vote of no confidence, the media minister didn't come out and sort of make a statement and say, "Oh well, that was very bad." He didn't condemn it at all. He just ignored it. It's almost like, is it par for the course?
It is about you taking care of your people and attacking those who are not with you. If you're not on my side, you're on the other side, kind of thing. But since you mentioned this businesswoman who purchased this newspaper and all that, now we have to keep in mind the entire the overall context. We had a regime during which time, the previous regime, where we moved from censorship to ownership. You purchased the opposition in the media, right? But even now we don't have that. We have interests, of course, but we do have people calling up editors and saying, "Stop that person's column." We have that. Previous regime, we had Gotabaya Rajapaksa calling Champika Liyanarachcha, the Daily Mirror editor, and which is totally uncalled for, right? Threatening or scolding her, or something like that. Editors, journalists know this. I mean, even if you are operating in an owned newspaper, all newspapers are owned by someone or the other, all media stations. This is one, and there are parameters within which we have to operate. But if you are skilled, if you are innovative, if you are brave, and if you are committed, you can still get your story across. If you can't do that, then you don't complain about it. What's the point in complaining? You are not capable of managing that, right? We always push the boundaries a little bit. So we know that intimidation, that's out there. We know that happens one way or the other. They can. And it's not only politicians. You attack any corporate, you find out immediately how powerful the corporate sector is in this business of intimidation. But they do it in a very subtle way. They speak to the CEO, we are not going to give you ads, right? So then it's a matter of them having to balance their accounts, and they need the income from the advertising income is what runs newspapers, as you know. So there's all kinds of intimidation. The CEO will tell you, go slow on this, go soft on this, just don't, forget this. We have seen that happening all the time, but we don't talk about it. Why? Because it's a corporate sector. So intimidation for us is definitely part of the course, but then there are of course degrees now. In the previous regime we saw Poddal Jayanta being attacked, we saw Lasantha Wickramatunge murdered, Upali Tennakon, Keith Noya being attacked. Who did those things we really don't know, but a government which is supposed to take care of law and order has a responsibility. They have to protect the people and they have to catch the culprits, none of which happened. So then the finger has to be pointed towards those who made the decision, the big decision makers in the government. Even in this instance, under this government, when someone is attacked or calls are made, it's more subtle, because perhaps they feel that they can't really take out guns and shoot, and it's still 3 years into the regime. They think, I think mistakenly, that they still have an ideological sway over the polity, which is not true. But if they felt that was slipping out, you will see immediately, this is what history has shown, how they quickly move to coercion.
Now then, we hear these things, we see all these things, but do you think that these politicians are ever going to play the blindest bit of notice to the stuff that the media are bringing out? We highlighted the detail of the bond scam. We've spent a lot of time and effort and a lot of research into it, persuading people to come out and talk about it and to inspire whistleblowers and so on. And yet we find, sadly, that there is, although the Presidential Commission of Inquiry has sort of come a certain distance, we have the Prime Minister, we have his friend of several years, Malik Samaravikrama, and now lately we have the Governor of the Central Bank, all confirming more or less that there is approximately 12 billion belonging to perpetual treasuries stuck in the central bank. What they didn't say is that it's continuing to attract interest. That's fine. But nobody is talking about the second bond, which happened on the 31st of March 2016. And so now we are pushing and highlighting this thing and lobbying for the need to have, and we're reporting on that because we want someone somewhere to recognize that there is a need to look into that, because there's another 6 billion out there.
There were, for us, sometimes journalists think they are very powerful, they can change newspapers. Newspaper owners believe that, which is not really true. And the outcome of our efforts, they don't become tangible overnight. Sometimes they don't become tangible in the ways that we expect them to. But we still live in a country where governments are thrown out of power by the ballot. So even this bond issue they don't seem to worry, obviously. I mean, the Prime Minister is now in Singapore. Right? Arjun Mahendran is in Singapore. I know it's a big country and all that, but their friends, they probably know where people are. And there's a warrant, right? For his arrest or for
well, they want him coming
They
back.
Want him to come. I mean, he's not coming. He's absconding. The Prime Minister's close associate and friend. He says, I'm not going to do anything with people who have done wrong. Who are that's washing his hands off. He has a responsibility.
He is actually washing his hands off, because the new National Audit Bill, Mr. Sunil Handunetti explained yesterday that the National Audit Commission can impose a surcharge on an errant whoever. But that's the end of the matter. The implementation, collecting that surcharge, falls on the line ministry secretary.
Right.
Now that secretary is dependent on that minister for his overseas travel and his all sorts of perks and privileges.
Yeah, but you were right when you said that it's a watered down bill.
Yeah.
Handunet said we brought 16 amendments which were not taken into account.
Yeah.
And what we have seen, everyone wants a national audit bill. Let's not be we need that.
Yeah.
But like we needed the 17th, like we needed the 19th.
Yeah.
But that became just a name.
Yeah.
If your piece of legislation is flawed and it's weak, then the name doesn't ceases to matter.
Yeah.
Here we have a politicization of the entire audit process. You're weakening the Auditor General. You have the institution, so you're creating a lot of shortcuts, where people can get by. Handunetti said that the minimum fine is down to 5,000.
Yeah.
That's the fine for a traffic violation.
Indeed.
Right? So, are these people really serious about this stuff? So I don't think so. I think that, and again, when you talk about intimidation and the power of journalists or newspapers to make politicians think, when they have given up, I don't think they have, when you know that you're going to lose, you give up. Or when you think that you cannot lose, you don't care, which is what happened to the previous regime. The opposite, I believe, is happening to this regime. They are not, they don't take any of these things seriously.
Indeed.
But that does not mean we should not try. That does not mean we should not do our job. We should continue to educate the public, who will decide at the right time what to do with the government, with the politicians, with the political parties.
So we report, you decide.
We report, you decide. But the problem is this: we are made out, the structure is such, the political structure is such, that we have to decide between two bad, the alternative is not necessarily better. We saw this in 2015, and we probably will see it in 2020. So you get a change of face, and nothing else has changed. When you see we conveniently forget. History starts in 2005 now. For certain people in this country, we're forgetting 88, 89. We're forgetting the censorship that happened during the UNP regime of 77 and 89 under J.R. Jayawardena and Ranasinghe Premadas. So we are forgetting Chandrika Kumaratunga, and there was an editor who was killed. And so we have a long history of intimidation of journalists and intimidation of media and infringing the media rights and so on. So I don't think that is going to change anytime soon. That does not mean we should not do our jobs. There are people, even under the Rajapaksa regime, there were people I don't really agree with, but they were very brave, and they regardless of the possibility of all kinds of things happening, they went ahead and said what they had to say.
Well, I don't see, I don't recall Newsfirst being any less vociferous than it is now. Within the same structure and the framework. But do you think that this government of good governance will actually sit up and take notice of what we're saying? Or are they just dismissing this as, oh, it's just Sirasa again, oh, it's just them again, and just downplaying it? Because if we are downplaying it, and if we've got it wrong, why doesn't Lakshman Kirialla, for example, about the Central Expressway, I mean, he's broken the rules. The ministers do not have any right to negotiate with contractors.
No, I think they believe, Faraz, that okay, that's Sirasa, that's empty, that's Maharaja. You know, they are always attacking us. They might think that. And they probably think their supporters think the same thing. But what they don't understand is that all kinds of people watch this, not this program only, but all the programs. And they come to their own conclusions. And if we are lying, they're going to buy that lie. So why are they not correcting that?
Exactly.
Right now, the response to that attack, so-called, on Lake House journalists by Mangala Samaravira clearly indicates that they are really not interested. They are just shooting the messenger. Right? The message is very simple. This was a story which which came out in 2015, rehashed by New York Times in 2018, and all of a sudden the government says, the New York Times has said this, oh my God, this must be true. It could be true. It could be true. But it is also true that John Kerry openly acknowledged that that the United States gave money to defeat Mahinda Rajapaksa. So what is the difference between China giving money to Rajapaksa and America giving money to the Yahapalana government, Yahapalanists? Just two different countries. This is what corporates do. And I suspect that whoever was doing the paying paid off people on all parts of the political spectrum, as corporate donors do. They pay you, they pay me, they pay the other one also. They are covering their bases. Corporates do that, countries do that.
But if you noticed from the statement issued by the Chinese embassy, at no point did they actually say they didn't deny that this money was given.
What they said was, we are doing good business.
Yes.
We are doing good business and we have not broken those codes, mutual benefits and so on. They have kind of couched it in that way. I think that's an admission as far as it can come, that they are okay with it. Corporates include bribes when they, when they calculate their budgets. And in contracts, you know that this person has to be paid, so a certain amount is left for that. That is business, right? That is what all businesses do. No corruption there in that sense. Corruption is when we don't expect these people to take money, but they do. There have been many cases like that where politicians have refused to take, but now it has become common practice. I don't think it's a good thing, because then you're compromised. But in this instance, I think China paid. I mean, that corporate paid the previous government, just as America paid the UNP and the
just
SLFP.
as the stories in some elections ago that RAW paid or gave 400 million to Ranil's lot. We don't know.
I don't know the authenticity of that story, but
no,
yes,
exactly. But that's what the
what is the hue and cry about all this?
Exactly.
There is nothing illegal that has happened. The ethical issue could be that they gave money and they got a port. The story was, I love the headline. How China got Sri Lanka to cough up a port. But is it only a port that has been coughed up in the last 70 years? How many things were coughed up? And how much of money went into various people's pockets? Can any party, including the JVP, claim that they are innocent of taking bribes from corporates or countries? Donations. They call it donations. That's a sanitized term, but that's bribe.
But do you think any of these big stories, how much of an impact will these big stories have?
Too late.
On the people?
If you are talking about elections, it's too late. I remember when...
will the common man remember The bond scam. Will they?
Maybe I think the common man know, they have come to a point where they are saying, okay, they are all crooks, that doesn't matter. At least these crooks can do this, these crooks can't do this.
Right.
So they have come to that. We have, as an electorate, and we are part of that, come to that conclusion. The majority are of the view that these guys can't do anything. They are the most confused, most incompetent government since independence. So when you come to that conclusion, whether this guy takes a bit of money, this guy, Mahinda did this after the Prime Minister in Parliament, orchestrated a kind of a rally in Parliament. Mama kiwat passe ogolan kiyanne kawuda hora. Mahinda Rajapaksa, in the immediate rally he held, he asked the same question. Kawuda hora. And then they responded. So they have made horakama or theft or wrongdoing a joke. This government, by not prosecuting, and this government by indulging in the same practices, wrongdoing, have made corruption and all this a non-issue as far as the electorate is concerned. That is troublesome, but that is the reality.
And how, what is the reality when it comes to the next election? What will happen?
Well, I'm not Sumanada, sir.
No.
Indications are, if the February 10th election result is anything to go by, if we are going to have provincial council elections, as people are saying they'll have, and that is also another issue because they have failed to bring electoral reform. They are saying we are going back to the PR system. That is self-preservation, nothing else. They have deliberated on this for 3 years and they can't come up with it. They are incompetent. But whatever system they have, we will see the February 10th election result becoming worse for the UNP and the SLP. Obviously the Sri Lanka Podujana Peramuna is going to benefit, and that is going to add momentum to that charge against this regime. I'm not going to talk numbers, but if it's a general election, I think that will be the same. Presidential election, it's a different kind of ball game, and there can be other factors that come into play. But things don't look rosy for the United National Party or Maithripala Sirisena. We have to understand that these two are together, they're Siamese twins, they're joined at the hip, political hip. You can't say, no, you did that, and they can't say you did that. They're together. Together. So if they are being swept out or kept in, it will be done together.
All together. Well, that's interesting. So well, the bottom line is that we're going to be expecting some interesting times ahead.
All times are interesting if you want them to be.
Malinda Seniviratne, thank you very much for being on Newsline on Tuesday the 10th of July 2018. And that's the way it was here on Newsline. We'll see you same time, same place tomorrow morning with yet another interesting guest. Take care. God bless.
Newsfirst, Newsline with Faraz Shauketaly.